So thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Brissette Concrete and Forming. They have been a longtime sponsor of this event. They are one of our lead sponsors, and they are today's lunchtime sponsor. So thank you so much to Brissette Concrete and Forming. Today we're talking about supporting the mental health of families in a pandemic with Dr. Rob Meter. So for you, those of you who have not yet met Dr. Meter, he's a pediatrician and the new medical director of the new Family, Child, and Youth Mental Health program at Waypoint. So we are so lucky to have Rob with us and to be starting this new chapter for Waypoint and community mental health services for children and youth. So thank you so much, not just for being here today, but for being here in general. Many of us are relieved to know that there's going to be more support in the community. Dr. Meter has more than 20 years of experience in pediatrics. He loves to talk about behavior and mental health in children. He's got a focus on families, looking at a holistic and more collaborative way to address mental health issues in children. So it's a great conversation to lead into today, where it's not just about the mental health of our children and youth, but it's also about the mental health of the whole family unit and the community that supports our children. So that will be talked about today. And Dr. Meter lives in Orillia with his wife and 4 kids. So he's coming from that, from this as someone with clinical experience, but also somebody with the experience of having a family himself. All proceeds from the sponsorships, the donations that are being made, this weekend's Mental Health in Motion event, will be supporting the development of a child, youth, and family waiting room at the new Community Health Hub. So thank you to everybody who has already signed up, sponsored, made donations. If you haven't had a chance yet, you can do it at waypointcenter.ca. You can also find the link on our Facebook page, so please sign up. This weekend's event, it's choose your own adventure, so get out with your bubble, canoe, kayak, run, jog, whatever you like to do to get active. It's really just about taking some time for yourself. So whatever you want to do to get out with your family and be active, we absolutely encourage that, and all of the proceeds will go to the Child and Youth Family Waiting Room. Last thing is, if you haven't had lunch yet today, proceeds from sales at Doc Lunch today will be dedicated to this project as well. So a portion of sales will be donated. And thank you so much to Nick and everybody at Doc Lunch for doing that. And tonight we have the Art Health series. So if you want to hear more from Rob, tune in tonight at 7:30. It is available on Rogers, but it's also available online. So please check that out. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Rob. So Rob, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. You'll be sick of me after the next 2 days, because it's true. It's a double header today with the Our Health series. So thanks for inviting me again. I got the invitation, a couple months ago. I was like, what? It's already a year, and it has been a year. I did a few talks last year for this series, and I'm so excited to do it again this year. I do see some people admitting or waiting for the waiting rooms. I assume Shelley and Holly, you guys are managing that. So thank you. And so thanks for coming on this call today. It's so great to see the community support. I mean, so many people have come out and sponsored these events, have donated. And it's going to be for a great cause. We're expanding mental health services for kids, for families in this area. I always like to add that family part because, you know, kids function in family units. And that is just so important that, you know, we can't really support kids without supporting families. They're part and parcel of each other. They function within each other, and they're important for supporting each other. So I've made up a sort of a few slides to kind of introduce the topic and talk about some of these things. I will just share my screen now, and just give me 2 seconds here. Good. Okay, so let's see, slideshow in the beginning. Okay. Now, do you see just this slide, or do you see my notes as well? Maybe Holly or Shelley I never know which screen actually pops up.
I'm seeing your notes.
We're seeing
Yeah.
your notes as well. There we go.
There we go.
Not anymore, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Somebody has, it's so weird. Somebody has to tell me what they're actually seeing before I know which screen to swap. So anyways, I really wanted to talk about families during this session because it has been a hard year for families, to say the least. You know, when this started, I don't think anybody knew what to expect. I had no idea what to expect. It was like, it was crisis mode at the beginning. The coronavirus came in February. In March, it really hit over here. My daughter was in France at the time on an exchange. And so we had to scramble to get her out. We got her out through Switzerland on our own on a plane with COVID swirling around. And we had no idea how it would affect kids at the time. And anyways, and then my parents both got COVID. My dad was in the ICU for 8 days and on a ventilator. He survived. My mom also got it quite bad and survived. So, and they're doing well now. So like that was the beginning of COVID. And I thought this is going to be a few weeks. You know, this pandemic's going to sort of, you know, sweep over Canada, United States, and, you know, we'll try and control it. And of course, first wave came. We had no idea that the second and third wave would be even worse in so many ways. And it's almost like we've gotten immune to seeing these numbers, these large numbers, and it almost, the meaning seems to be lost sometimes, but this is a huge issue. And at the same time, as the medical stuff's been going on, you know, the cases and the hospitalizations and the ICU numbers, you know, kids have been isolated from their support systems. Schools have been canceled. Camps were canceled last summer, of course, day camps, all those school activities, sports, you know, everything was different. And then schools kind of flip-flopped between virtual in person, virtual in person. And it was a huge change for kids. None of them went to their graduations last year. Kids started grade 9 online, or you know, at least in a quadmester or octamester system for high school with masks on and physical distancing. You know, gym was not gym anymore. School sports teams and all these clubs were gone. You know, summer jobs, a lot of them disappeared. So it was just a hard time, and so but we're all here now, and it looks like we're on a tail end. So I thought I would just start by saying I think the end is in sight. And as a pediatrician who, you know, who knows about vaccines and who's been on the forefront of just, you know, recommending those for kids for years, I mean, that's sort of what pediatricians do. I'm really excited about yesterday's announcement to have kids included in the Pfizer rollout. And I do think that that is going to be key to getting more of the population immune, even from the current variant that's circling around. So that is, that's exciting for sure. And I think that's going to be very helpful. It also gives us hope. We see numbers gradually starting to come down. I think we've crested the third wave. And if we can get enough people vaccinated, I think we can severely blunt or even avoid a fourth wave. So, and that's getting kids vaccinated is going to be key for that. The Pfizer vaccine, I have no concerns at all with regards to safety and biological, you know, effect with in the kids that take it. So I am recommending it. In fact, this morning I had, I think 4 or 5 12 and over patients and recommended to all of them, and most said that they would get it. So, which I was excited to hear. People are eager to do their part in fighting this pandemic. So all that to say, I don't think summer's gonna be normal, but it's gonna be more normal, I think, than last summer, and more hopeful with school starting in the fall. That will at least have, I suspect, primarily in person, back to a regular school system, school schedule, a semester schedule, for example, for high schools in the fall, with online options for those who choose to go that route, which I think might be a nice fallout or consequence of this pandemic year is we've really learned how to do virtual schooling better. It does not replace in-person schooling, but for some kids, this could be a viable option, and definitely expands the way that we are delivering education and curricula to our kids in the province and in Canada. So this might be a sort of an unexpected bonus for that. But so how's the pandemic affected families? Well, I just kind of went into that. It's been hard on families. And I think we're going to take some time to heal from a lost year in many ways, a year of loss. And we're going to talk a bit about how to do that. And then envisioning really what a new normal looks like. I just alluded to the fact that schools may look different next year and may look different for forever. Just like our jobs may look different forever. I know my job's going to look different for the foreseeable future. There's going to be much more virtual mental health care that we're going to be delivering. So, you know, kids don't have to drive for 2 hours now to see me for a half an hour or 15 minutes for an appointment. They can simply log on and I can see them at home. And sometimes that's actually a much better situation than taking a whole day off to drive to see me for a short visit. So, and then, you know, I hate to say it, but there might be another crisis in our future of some other kind. And can we learn from what we've had in this pandemic for a next crisis, whether it's, you know, a global one or a national one or something more local or even just within your family? You know, what can we learn from this current crisis that we could take into our lives in the future to help us weather those crises in a better way? So how have families fared? Well, the data is just coming out now. We are seeing more and more studies that are completing now a year in and are being published. This one was in British Medical Journal just recently, like I think within the last few days, end of April, I believe it was. Just looking at the pandemic on family mental health in Canada. And they asked, I believe it was about 3,000 families. And there was families who were adults without children, and there was those with children under 18. And you can see that families where there were children, you know, all the reports were worse, to say it in a nice way. So, you know, parents reported worse mental health, 44% if they had kids versus 36% if they did not have kids.
Rob, we're just having trouble seeing the one part of your slide where it says mental health, more alcohol, thoughts, feelings. We're just missing that half of that slide there.
Oh, well, I don't know why that is. Can you see that slide?
Yeah.
But not this one.
Oh, there, now it's fine. That's good for everybody else?
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
That's good, Holly. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's fine. I have no idea what I did other than just go back and forth. So must be one of those glitchy things. So yeah, and sorry, I wasn't keeping my eye on the chat room either. So you probably were like madly trying to get my attention. So sorry about that. So anyways, yeah, so many families, there was more consumption of alcohol. And that's, I know by report, I mean, I talked to lots of families and friends of mine, and, you know, what went from kind of 1 or 2 drinks a week became a drink every night. Kids were just, you know, families were locked at home and weren't driving anywhere. And it just seemed like, well, this is the end of a long day. It's been another tough day. And so that was definitely more alcohol use. Suicidal thoughts and feelings, you know, that's pretty severe, obviously, when you get there. Obviously lower numbers there, but again, increased when there were kids around. And then just stress about domestic violence, and that could be physical or emotional, you know, 12% versus 8%. Again, not huge increase, but definitely increased. And these numbers are significant. And I've seen many families where the stress level has gotten to the point where resilience has not been able to meet the demands. And so it's been a difficult year. 25% of parents reported that their children's mental health had worsened. And those are the kids I'm seeing for sure. 45% reported about being worried about finances. 20% reported food insecurity at some point during the past year. Those who worried about finances and worsening mental health also were more likely to report increased conflicts with their children, increased use of discipline, increased use of harsh words and shouting. So the family dynamics just got tenser in many families. However, it wasn't all bad, and there were some interesting learnings as well. And I'll reflect a little bit on what I've seen in my practice here. The majority of parents also reported increased positive interactions at home. So it's like they were reporting increased negative interactions, but also increased positive interactions. They in fact, what you can take away from that, they were just reporting more interactions in general. And so that's an interesting thing to think about, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the majority of parents also report increased positive interactions, including more quality time, more feeling close to one another. It's like a no-brainer. People are thinking like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? More showing love and affection, and just observing resilience in their kids' ability to manage stress. Many parents reported that was actually seen as well. Some parents reported worse children's health, but more actually reported better physical health in their kids. So I think we're gonna have to think about that and drill down on that a bit more. I mean, personally, I see a lot more kids are spending more time on screens, which I thought would have an impact on physical health. On the other hand, maybe there was opportunity for kids to, be outside more. We've also seen organized sports decrease, so I thought that would have a negative effect. But I mean, this is what the data is showing. So it'll be interesting to drill down further on that and see exactly where that's coming from. Interestingly, divorce rates initially increased in the first few months of the pandemic and then decreased. So people are just kind of thinking about that too. What's the reason for that? Probably, if couples who were kind of on the edge already or are having a lot of stress before, the start of the pandemic maybe would have just been the breaking point. Whereas those that weathered that time maybe worked things out. But there was also financial stressors that may have kept families together. It's expensive to go through a separation and divorce. So maybe that was a factor as well. So again, some interesting observations for now. I think over time we'll get a better sense of why, but these are the observations at this point that I want to share with you. This is a pattern that we've seen, that families who were generally more resilient before the pandemic tended to actually do better. They reported more positive interactions, whereas those who were already kind of struggling with a lot of family stress and dynamics at home tended to get worse. This is similar to that K-shaped trajectory that we saw with the economy as well, and financial situations of people, where there are some in the pandemic who actually have fared very well economically and financially, and there are other groups in certain sectors, particularly, and in certain areas geographically, that have really gone down, and that has widened the gap. And I think we're also going to see a widening of other gaps as well, more on a social level. So that needs to be addressed, because gaps like this are not good in society. It is better for gaps to be smaller and for there to be more equality and equity in a society for it to function well. Especially, of course, if we're on the wrong end of that gap, which many of us are. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was interesting. I made this observation to our leadership team here at the time. I was like, I thought, when lockdowns first happened and schools were closed, I was like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen? Kids are going to struggle. This is going to be very hard for kids. And initially, I actually found that many kids were doing better. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. I would kind of log on, do all these virtual visits, say, like, how's it going? And they say, oh, great, actually, the kids are doing fine. And turns out, the initial part of the lockdown was essentially an extended March break. And so for many kids, it was a long vacation, and maybe no surprise that they were doing better. And there's also a group of kids that I follow, particularly in my practice, for whom school is stressful, school is difficult and hard. And I suspect that once that stress of school was taken away, their stress level decreased and probably behavior improved and anxiety decreased. So probably we were seeing some of those kids as well at the time. However, the kids that were going to struggle initially weren't, but eventually did. And during the second and third lockdowns and school closures and ongoing cancellation of things, even the most resilient kids were starting to feel anxious. And so I would say that in the population of kids that I've seen, the vast majority of teenagers and children and their parents have felt some level of concern about mental health, about the ability to cope. And we're all resilient to some extent, but all of our elastics are going to snap at some point. So the third lockdown has been particularly hard on people. And I'm afraid if we had another one, like if there was a fourth wave, if vaccines are not the answer, obviously, but if we have to weather a fourth wave and another lockdown, I think compliance is going to be very difficult. You're going to have a lot of people just going to snap at that point, and a lot of families will fall through the cracks. So while parenting pressures during the pandemic have increased, so have opportunities to strengthen family connectedness. And this is one of the conclusions from one of the papers that looked at this. So something to think about. So how do we move from that? So moving ahead, let's just talk about mitigating some of the harms of the past year. What can we do about that? So the first thing we need to do is recognize and address COVID-related mental health problems in ourselves and in our kids. We've seen a dramatic rise in certain conditions, especially things like eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, and other anxiety-related disorders. These types of behaviors are increasingly common. I know that I was talking to the eating disorder nurse practitioner at OSMH about a month ago, and she says, yeah, we've seen over 100% increase of eating disorders this year over last year, and quarter to quarter. So it's quite significant. Even I'm seeing a lot of kids with disordered eating, not necessarily eating disorder, but just disordered eating, to the point where it's still, subclinical in terms of a diagnosis. They're functioning still at home, but their eating habits have changed. They've become more restrictive. There's been some concerns about, inadequate weight gain and malnourishment, but not to the point where it requires hospitalization, but certainly to the point where it requires counseling and talking about this and maybe, looking at the root causes of that. So kids who develop these, often it's about loss of control, loss of agency, and hopelessness about the future. So it's a combination of anxiety, depression, and a reaction to that is controlling what we eat. OCD is on that same spectrum as well. So we've seen an increase in all of these mental health conditions in kids. So we need to recognize and address these. If you see that that's happening in your kids or in your family, I urge you to talk to your physician, look at counseling options and therapy options. It is going to be limited. There are wait lists, unfortunately, for all these services. If you have private options, then it's more available. But in general, this is a lot of people are going to be looking for this kind of service in the near future. But don't let that stop you. Just make sure you look around and ask around for help for your kids. We need to drop some pandemic habits that we've picked up. I know I have had to. Alcohol use I mentioned already, and substance use for some. We've picked up some bad habits. We've been locked inside. These were coping mechanisms in increasingly isolated times. And now it's time for us to maybe recalibrate and drop some of these habits. We've had disrupted schedules. I noticed that for almost every child, once we enter lockdown, bedtimes tend to shift later because kids are getting up later, because they don't have to catch a school bus and the mornings are less hectic. I've 4 kids at home, and my 3 teenagers, they've, they'll literally like roll out of bed and onto the laptop within 5 minutes and be in their class. So, but we need to get back to a more sensible bedtime routine and a routine overall in school. Poor diet. We've been eating comfort food. We've been eating more. Many people have gained weight during the pandemic. Lack of exercise in many of us because we can't get to gyms, or there's been no organized sports, as I mentioned before. So unless we were like adamant about that, that's been hard. Screen time I mentioned as well. Everything is virtual now, and social media has been a lifeline actually for many teenagers. We were really worried about screen time before the pandemic. We're probably even more worried about it now because online screen time is not the same as face-to-face time. The connections that you make online are not the same. And so we're seeing a lot of kids lose their ability to have conversations, face-to-face interactions, make eye contact. We're all getting better at Zoom, but we've gotten worse at being in the room. So we need to get back to that. We've even seen some kids, some infants, lose their language skills because they're not seeing mouths anymore, and because of masks. So, so screen time for sure is one thing that we need to really address with our kids. And I always suggest, if you can, do this collaboratively. Don't be draconian about no more screen time for next 3 weeks or whatever. Sometimes you have to do a screen time fast, or you have to kind of do it cold turkey, but most of the time it's best just to kind of dial it back with some sensible restrictions, like no screen time after a certain time before bed, charging devices in the kitchen or downstairs so it's not beside their beds, and just limiting screen time with screen time apps and options on your phone to sort of monitor that as parents. We need to address the widened educational gaps. So many kids have fallen behind. I guess maybe the only quote unquote good thing is that this is true for everybody. It's not like only in a certain town kids have fallen behind, or a certain school. No, like all schools, kids are going to need to catch up with some of the educational deficits that have probably formed. There might be frayed family relationships. I know many families, there are different opinions about COVID, about restrictions, about vaccines. That needs to be talked about, and they're hard conversations. We've all formed opinions, sometimes very strong opinions, about issues that have come up with COVID. And I think it really behooves us as extended families, especially, to move past those. Our world is more polarized, and we've seen a lot of polarization due to coronavirus and COVID and the lockdowns restrictions, probably more so south of the border, but in Canada as well, we're not immune to that. So we need to work on that. Many families missed milestones. I'm not saying we can go back and do the graduation again, but we've had funerals that couldn't have been held because of restrictions. Weddings have been put off. Anniversary celebrations, Christmases. I know, like my family, we missed Christmas for the first time in 20 years with our extended family this year. We first missed Thanksgiving. We thought, okay, we'll get together at Christmas. Then no Christmas. And so we'll get together at Easter. No Easter. And so we need to restart some of these things, because those are important things for families to experience together, and for kids especially. For some of these kids, they've missed a whole year of these sorts of annual celebrations, which are key for our society and for our culture. I really hope we get to have some kind of Canada Day, but I think it's already been canceled. Who knows? Maybe we could still do something to celebrate that as maybe the quote unquote sort of reopening of our society. So fingers crossed that we'll get there and public health is able to allow some sort of celebration. And then lastly, I know personally, I've been reading much more news than I probably should be. Social media is not really kind of my thing, but I know many people have been on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook, and our kids have been on Snapchat and TikTok. And, again, for a while, that's all they had from a social perspective, but we need to do, we need to get away from that. We need to probably, it's almost like we need to put our phones away for a couple of weeks and shut off our laptops and our computers and just enjoy a digital free world for a few weeks. Definitely as parents, make sure that you help yourself. It's very tempting to kind of pour yourself into your kids. I know as parents, that is sort of our natural inclination, is to give all we have for our kids. But it's like the classic example of the oxygen in the airplane. If you don't put it on your face yourself, I mean, you actually are supposed to do that first, and then you're supposed to put it on your kids. Because the ability to look after your children will only be as good as the extent to which you look after yourself. We can be better parents and partners for our spouses, for our significant others, if we look after ourselves. It is not selfish to take care of yourself. So proper self-care is important. Children co-regulate with their closest caregivers. There's this concept of the interbrain, between the brain between our brains and our kids' brains. There is this nonverbal communication that happens. Kids sense our stress, they sense our anger, they sense our frustration, and it spills over into their behavior. This is very obvious to those of us who have very young kids and infants, that we're trying to settle. It's harder for them to settle if they feel that we're stressed and we're anxious. But this extends right to adults as well. There's a lot of stuff that happens between people, and so kids especially co-regulate with their closest caregivers. So parental stress equals children's stress. So look after yourself. We've all been affected by COVID. We all need help. Like I said, everybody's got resilience to some degree, but for everybody, this elastic has been stretched. For some, it's snapped, and we need to look after ourselves. Do not feel guilty about taking time for yourself. Do not feel guilty as a couple to rediscover date nights and going out as a couple, so that you can be better parents when you're with your kids. So what does the new normal look like? We need to keep looking forward and be positive and be optimistic. I know it's easy to think, okay, well, I got burned a few times, like my example of around, at Thanksgiving, we were thinking Christmas, at Christmas, we were thinking Easter, and now Easter, we're thinking Canada Day. But, we got to stay optimistic. We gotta look ahead. And we have to look at what in the past has strengthened our family. What have we done that's brought us closer? And we need to build resilience for any stressors that come forward in the future. So, appreciate connections that you're able to have in the next, year and 2 years as COVID settles down. Maximize digital connections. Like I said, it's not the same, but I know, like, I've actually connected more with my parents who live in Sarnia via Zoom than probably I would have had in person had there not been COVID. So we've kind of discovered a weekly Zoom call has been fantastic to catch up and to kind of see the other person better than a phone call, which is usually what it was. I don't know, something about my dad's just not comfortable talking on the phone, but we can spend an hour or an hour and a half on a Zoom call, no problem. So just leverage that. I mean, that's great. That's a great use of digital connections. And even people around the world. I mean, parts of the world are not going to be opened up for a while. If you've got family across the world, Zoom call them and use digital technology to your advantage. really reach out to extended families. We got to reestablish some of these networks, especially if they've been frayed by politics or various opinions. We just extend olive branches and just come to a common understanding of we're family or we're friends. We're a group of people that wants to be together. Establish new routines and habits. Family dinner has become a staple at our house, which it wasn't before. With the cancellation of after-school activities, my kids have been home every night, for better or for worse. But it has meant that we've had a chance to have dinner together as a family almost every night. And those have been actually fun times for us, and we want to keep that. And so my hope going forward is that we can maintain family dinner and family time in the evenings more than we did in the past. Our schedules were packed before. And those were good things, but I think we've seen a little bit of what, family time can be for our family in particular, and it may be different in your family, but if there's an opportunity to do that more, take it. Mindfulness, stress reduction, we need to spend time doing this. I'd recommend for any couple, no matter how well you're doing, go for regular marriage counseling. I've really become a big proponent of you can work on your marriage at any time. In fact, you should work on it more when you're doing well. That way, you'll have fewer times when you have to go seek counseling when you're not doing well. So working on your marriage and your partnership when things are going well is going to really be good prevention for the next stressor down the road. Exercise, can't say that enough, very important. And here's a little phrase that I kind of made up called routine spontaneity. So yes, routines are great and schedules are great, and it's nice to know what's coming up. But some of the funnest moments in the past year for my family has been going for McFlurries at 11 o'clock at night, or going for, my teenagers like to go for music drives. So we just go for a drive and they just blast the music. I literally wear those ear muffs that you wear on the lawnmower in the car because they just like to play their music really loud. It's been a good outlet for them. And those have just been fun times. And they've been spontaneous. It literally isn't like, hey kids, let's go. Or, one of my kids will bring it up and it's like, okay, normally I got stuff to do, got talks to get ready, I've got, work to do or emails to do. It's like, no, we're doing this. So, and we go out and do it. It's always been the right decision. And then, just also a time for looking ahead and saying, how can we strengthen our parenting skills? It is hard to be the connected parent that you want to be. And so a lot of my work day to day really is just parenting advice. It's not so much making diagnoses and medications and changing medications. A lot of it is just straightforward, like how do you connect with your kids? How do you connect with each other? How do you manage behaviors? What does behavior mean? And that is really important to be intentional about. I mean, we all tend to parent how we were parented. That's sometimes a good thing, but sometimes it's not a good thing. And there are some cycles and habits that we need to break. And taking the time to do that, again, when things are getting better, is a really wise thing to do. Here's just a few books that lately I've been recommending. There's probably hundreds more great books out there, but I'll just kind of throw these up on the screen here and you can take away some of these titles and author names. But all of these books I would recommend wholeheartedly as being fantastic resources for families. The Tech Solution by Dr. GYMHiM is fantastic, probably the best book I've read about technology and kids and how it affects brains from a neurological basis, from a biological basis, but also some really practical advice on how to manage technology, not ban it. Technology is a tool, but how do you manage it in your family in just a smart way that it promotes development, social interaction, etc. Connected Parenting by Jennifer Clark, fantastic book, using the CALM technique. Talk about that with parents all the time. Dr. Shanker's book, Self-Reg, fantastic as well. all these books are great and highly recommended. So I'll leave with this, are we ready for the next crisis? Like I said, it might not be a global pandemic, might not be a national thing, could be something just within your family. And are we ready for that? And what can we do about it? So hopefully that's just some practical advice. I know I tend to blabber on a long time. We've still got a few minutes left. I'm happy to, I'll just stop sharing here. Happy to take any questions or comments. I learned so much from the families I work with. I learned so much from my own family. And a lot of this is personal reflections, more so almost than sort of evidence-based guidelines, because that's probably the best way to learn, I find, these sorts of things.
Rob, I do have one comment from Carol just saying, my stepdaughter is doing well with virtual because she feels protected by not having to attend the formal school classes. Is there something you're seeing in your patients as well?
Yes, and that's what I mentioned at the beginning. I was definitely seeing a lot of, I should rephrase that. We were seeing a subgroup of kids who actually did better outside the classroom environment. And so the fact that the school boards are offering online schooling next year, I think is great. And the one caveat I would have to that is that, one thing we want to avoid in kids who are anxious is avoidance. So I always say avoid the avoidance, because that tends to make the problem worse and makes a mountain out of a molehill, because the longer we stay away from school, it's harder to jump back into it again. So if the aim is eventually to go back to school, it's probably better to avoid the avoidance. And sometimes, being away from school can be almost enabling. But there are some kids, for whom, online learning is just a better way to learn. And if that works better, great. And if there's other ways for your kids to get social interactions and to enjoy other activities, fantastic. I know some kids find the classroom environment intimidating for many other reasons. It can be overwhelming from a sensory perspective. Sometimes there are, just peer issues that make it difficult. And maybe for those kids, being online is actually a better situation. Also depends what's happening at home. Some parents can support their kids online the way they need to be supported. Again, depends what your kids' needs are. But other families, that's not possible. And and so online learning is more difficult. I am worried about some kids who really are left on their own online and shouldn't be. They need to be supported by an adult. And those are the kids, I think, that are really struggling with this latest online as well. We'll talk more about online learning actually tomorrow. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, I have one question. Is there a reason they have not yet tested the vaccine on kids younger than 12?
They are testing the vaccine on kids younger than 12. We expect studies to come out soon, actually, for the five and over. And I've heard some initial studies for 2 and over as well. That's probably months away still. I actually, the news about the 12 and 15 kind of caught me a bit by surprise. I knew the studies had been done, but they'd always been saying it'll be a few more months before they're analyzed. But Health Canada got on this very quickly and did their analysis, and it looks sound and looks great. So I was happy to hear that it rolled out to 12 to 15 yesterday. I was very, very excited about that, because for so many kids, this can be, great for their reintegration back into society. I'm even, again, just mildly hopeful that schools can reopen before the end of the school year. I really hope that we don't have officials like government saying, oh, it's just a few more weeks of school. What does it matter? Like, let's just, go virtual for the rest of the school year and it will start in September. I don't like that attitude. I think even a small amount of school, just to finish off the school year in person, would be so meaningful for so many kids to say, goodbye to their friends and, wish them a good summer. Just to finish off in school, I think would be a really great idea. So I hope we don't just kind of shrug it off as being kids will be fine. They're not. They won't be fine. They'll be better if we can get them back in school as soon as possible.
I also have one here. My kid is watching way more TV than usual for our survival. Is this going to have a major impact on their development?
What is TV? Yeah, I know. I'm just joking. I assume you mean sort of screen time and YouTube.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Because you know, yesterday I did a little piece for CTV, and I thought, oh, we'll see what it's like at 6 o'clock, and I got to turn on TV. I haven't done that in like months. So, but most kids are spending a lot of time on screen time. Dr. Kang's book about the tech solution that I threw up there on the screen before talks a lot about how detrimental that can be to kids' development. Even just watching TV, I mean, TV shows for kids especially are rapidly changing sort of scenes, very fast action. And I know this because, you know, if you put Mr. Rogers in front of a kid now, they'll fall asleep in about 2 minutes because it's so slow. And yet that's what we grew up on as adults, you know. I'm not saying like the good old days, but, you know, it has changed dramatically. And it is quite frenetic now, the action that's on TV shows. And kids' brains aren't meant for that. And it doesn't serve them well in the real world where things happen much more slowly. Teachers know this firsthand. It's very hard for them to compete with these sort of fast-paced type things that kids are expecting now. Schools, of course, can't be that way, and social interactions with other people aren't that way. Life is not that way. So it does affect kids in a negative way. And so we need to limit, you know, TV watching for sure, video games, and screen time and social media, like all those. I mean, remember, as parents, we have to set limits. I mean, that's our job. Kids actually need limits. They'll actually be more anxious if they don't have limits. They need to, especially younger kids, need to know that we know what we're doing and we know what's going on, and we are there to help them and to have some sort of, you know, control over their lives that makes them feel comfortable and secure. And so we need to set limits for our kids. We are still, especially younger, we're still our kids' frontal lobes and our prefrontal cortex, which helps with, you know, planning and organizing and stuff like that, and staying on task. You know, if our kids have difficulty regulating that, we have to help them regulate that for them until they're able to do that themselves. Those brain functions and behaviors really don't come online until a later age. So we have to help them from that perspective. So setting rules around screen time is extremely important. Because if you don't, you know, the kids will be on there for 24/7 because, you know, they're getting the dopamine hits every time, you know, they move up a level or they win something or a little bell goes off or notification goes off or their phone buzzes because somebody's texted them. I mean, these are all like very addictive qualities of online screens, video games, and social media platforms.
Okay, the next one I have here is, how do I support my teens who are feeling so lonely and disconnected from the usual high school experience?
Yeah, teenagers probably have suffered the most. And I noticed because I have 3 teenagers myself, and it has been extremely hard on them. You know, I do, so right now, obviously, we're not supposed to be outside our household, so we want to respect that. There'll be increasing opportunities for kids to gather outside, which is probably safer in small groups, hopefully soon. So take advantage of that. It's safer to be outside than to be indoors, obviously. Allow your kids some free space. I know, you know, you want to kind of know what's going on with them and stuff like that. But, you know, that hour later that they're going to bed, you know, if they want to chat with their friends every once in a while, probably okay to do that. I mean, that's the only way sometimes that they're keeping up with their friends in their social circles. I hope that schools can reopen again. Obviously, that'll help with mental health, that sports will resume to some extent this summer. I hope that camps can reopen. You know, there are some summer jobs available. for our teenagers. So just we need to get society reopen, and the best way to do that is for us all now to do our part to slow COVID down, follow public health guidelines, so we drive down the community numbers, get vaccinated so that we don't have another resurgence. And once community numbers go down, we can open up parts of our society again, just as we did in the past. And hopefully with vaccines, we can keep things at bay. So the best thing you can do for your teenager now, I know it sounds like kind of cliche, but like, do our part with preventing COVID. That'll help them access their resources and supports sooner.
Great, thank you. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have, what advice do you have for brand new parents who are trying to navigate the early days and months of parenthood without the usual supports that are present when we're not in a pandemic?
Yes, so I mean, every situation is going to be different there, but I am actually mildly worried, I guess, about the youngest kids that have been born. I think of babies who have not really had much interaction with anybody outside of their parents. I've mentioned language development already, with lots of masks on and difficulty making facial connections, face-to-face connections. So I think the best thing you can do is really spend as much interactive time with your young infants as possible. I can't stress enough how important serve and return type interactions, playing with your baby, interacting with them in physical ways and verbal ways and eye contact ways is extremely important for their mental health and physical health later on in life. You are helping them develop their self-regulation skills, the security that they need. You are helping develop a secure attachment that every child needs in order to explore the world. They need to know they have a secure base. And that secure base is established within seconds after birth, and especially in the first few months of life. Those first few months in the first year is critical. And all the books that I put up there will tell you that this is so important. So if you're finding that you are more isolated as parents, you're spending more time with your child, just revel in that as much as you can. And unfortunately, if you have to go to work and you need somebody to look after your kids, that's been hard, because it's been hard to find caregivers for kids, for families that have to go back to work. But if you find someone that can have that sort of a relationship with your kids, your form a bubble if you need to. Remember, for young kids especially, COVID is mild illness. That's not to say that we don't need to be careful, because they can still spread it to adults, and I want to be careful when I make any sort of recommendations. But if you can bubble with somebody that you could trust and is reliable, do that, so that you can just expand that circle as much as you safely can. So yes, somebody there has their hand up, Juliana. Or maybe you're saying hi. Yep, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I was typing, sorry. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you. So inspiring. I am a student clinician working my way to become a psychotherapist. I hope to work with families, and it's so nice to hear from your experience with families. And I share of your view of the whole work with the family to support children, right?
Yeah.
I am also a mother of a 2.5 boy, a single child who wants to hug every child he sees in the street and dying to go to school. Talks about going to school. And so for him, he really wants the connection, right? And I just wanted to comment also from a personal perspective that we do a very huge effort as adults to put our technology down, because I see, we try to limit the screen for my son, but if we are on the phone all the time, that's not going to work, right? And I also feel that this, addiction, the more I use, the more I want to be on it. And then I find, even as an adult, my attention span just like, I cannot concentrate. I'm jumping from one thing to another. And when you see, it's just 1 hour passed, right? Or more. So I definitely see the effects as an adult, I imagine, with the children. But I just wanted to say thank you. Very inspiring.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, Juliana. And good to hear the work that you're doing. It's so important. And I hope your son gets to hug other kids as soon as possible. Because, like, those kind of interactions, they're just so good for the hugger and the huggee. So put it in a sort of a funny way, because oxytocin just flows. It's good for the brain. It's a good, neurohormone that just is our social bonding hormone. And we just need that for proper brain development. So I'm very much looking forward to, being near people. And that's also for teenagers too, right? They're very social creatures, and they need to be around other teenagers. So that's even more reason to get that group vaccinated as much as possible, because it's just hard for them to abide by the guidelines all the time, as much as they want to, and they're smart and responsible. They're just going to want to be around other teenagers sooner rather than later. So let's hope that we're successful in reaching that age group.
Well, Rob, thank you so much. We just have a couple minutes till 1, but I thought you may need to grab a drink of water, something. Rob has so kindly joined us during his lunch break. He's seeing patients all day. He's talking tonight at the Our Health series. Are there any final thoughts you wanted to share, Rob, before we close off here?
No, I mean, I've kind of shared most of my thoughts, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow. We'll talk about some just practical hints and tips for schools, and maybe look at how schooling has been affected by by COVID as well. So yeah, for sure, be there tomorrow. And thanks again to everybody to our sponsors as well. Fantastic response. I hear that it's been a fantastic week so far. So really glad to see the interest in this.
And if you can't join us tomorrow for Rob's next session, this will be recorded. This session was, the next one will. You can send any questions or comments to sprice@waypointcenter.ca. That's the same contact on all of the event information, so you can find that at waypointcenter.ca. That's also where you register, make a donation if you haven't had a chance yet. All of the donations and sponsorships are supporting the Child and Youth Family Waiting Room at the new Community Health Hub, which will also be connected to a lot of the work that Rob is doing. So again, Rob, thank you so much. Thank you to Brissette Concrete and Forming for sponsoring today's event, for being such a long-time sponsor of this entire program. And if you haven't had lunch yet, head over to Doc Lunch. A portion of sales from Doc Lunch will be going towards this fundraiser as well. And we also hope to see you tonight at the Our Health series, 7:30. That is on Rogers, but it's also available online. So if you don't have Rogers, you can see it online. There's a link available, so check that out. You can check it out on our schedule as well. So hope to see you there tonight and tomorrow. Lots of great things coming up tomorrow in the morning as well. And Rob, have a great afternoon, and thanks to all of you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.